Hi everyone, welcome to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce event. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I'm excited to be hosting the event today. The event that we will be doing and holding is on big data, blockchain, and the digitalization of energy. So this webinar will explore the areas that big data is increasingly reshaping the distribution of energy and its role in blockchain technologies will play in the years ahead. Areas of focus include the use of smart meters and big data to customize home energy use to achieve greater energy efficiency, the role of using new technologies to coordinate power grids that do not just distribute, but also receive energy from renewable assets, and what the digitalization of energy will mean for the Canadian economy. We have a great panel today. I will pass it on to everyone to introduce themselves, but I will also do a quick introduction of myself. So my name is Marnie Dawson. I am the principal of the Power and Utilities Group at Prairie Sky Strategy. Prairie Sky Strategy, we are a government relations public affair company. We specialize in local insights, strategy, government relations, management consulting, and business development. Our name, Prairie Sky, represents the wide, open, and endless opportunities and optimism that we believe is in Western Canada and beyond. Our team is known for their get-it-done attitude and our hyper-focus on results. Our focus is being the bridge to sustainable growth, and at Prairie Sky, the sky is the limit. That's our little tagline there. So I will now pass it on to Darren to introduce himself, and then we'll move on from there.
Hi, everybody. Darren from Enbridge. I'm a director in our customer care group, leading all things billing, meter reading, boring, things like that to serve our 3.7 million customers in Ontario. And what's the topic? The topic, I think these are all tools that we are getting our heads around as we look at energy transition. So energy transition, a huge issue at Enbridge. One thing that we are intensely focused on in terms of helping our customers with that energy transition, because carbon pricing, quite frankly, is going to start to change things dramatically. I've been in energy for 25 years, and I think we'll have more change in the last 10 years of my career than we've had in the first 25 years of my career. So, it will be interesting. It's really going to happen now. And, our role, what we see as our role here on Enbridge is helping customers. As much as we are in the, my business unit's in the delivery of gas, but really what underlies that is people want a home that's warm in the winter. They want a hot shower in the morning. And that's what we're in the business of. And energy transition will mean we're still delivering that, but looking at different ways to do that. Enbridge, our name is quite literally Energy and Bridge, and that's the role we want to play with our customers. All of these will be tools where we help customers. Big data in terms of how they use energy, smart meters to give them more real-time information. Although, as we get into this, we'll see whether that really matters. And if we think about, because as we think about efficiency, what really matters to a customer? Is it the real-time nature of that, or is it just where can I save and how can I do things differently? And that's what we will be there. That's the role we want to play with our customers. And so I'll pass it on to our next panelist to talk about what it means to their organization.
Thank you. I'm Doug Slater, Vice President of External and Indigenous Relations at Fortis BC. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Fortis BC's respect for Indigenous people in this place we call Canada, and on whose traditional territories we all live, work, and play. We've long supported engagement with Indigenous communities and building strong relationships based on respectful dialogue and mutual benefit. So a bit about Fortis BC. We're an integrated gas and electric utility providing energy to over 1.2 million homes and businesses in BC. And providing both gas and electricity energy to our customers provides us with a really unique perspective on many of the topics that we're going to cover here today. We view energy systems as, the gas and electric systems as complementary and connected. And in today's world, we do deal with a lot of interrelated issues. And so when we're talking about addressing things like climate imperative, resiliency of our energy systems, affordability of our energy, we know that we're going to need to ensure our systems continue to see investment and growth. And innovation and digitalization we see as enablers, and also we see them as tools that will help us achieve our long-term goals around sustainability, while also ensuring that we provide customers with safe, reliable, and affordable energy. So I'll just leave it brief at that. Look forward to the discussion, and thank you for to the organizers for inviting me to participate in the dialogue here today.
Thanks. John?
Hi, everyone. I'm John Weigl. I'm Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft here in Canada. And I help all segments, all sectors really understand where technology is moving so that they can move their technologies in that right direction. And so when I think about digitization of energy, I really think about that shift from operational technology, OT, to IT, and being able to manage your resources in perhaps a different way. And it's fundamentally changing the relationship between the producers, the distributors, and the consumers. And so while today we're talking about big data and blockchain, I'd like to look across this big change that we see from a technology perspective. So cloud computing, Internet of Things, big data, machine learning and artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and blockchain is really changing the way that we look at the generation of power, how it's distributed, and how it's consumed. And there's some really, really cool things happening around this new dynamicism, if I could create a word, this new dynamic around how this whole environment works. You know, this distributed generation that we see, these new consumption models, a lot of work's been done around focusing on electric vehicles and how the consumption of those vehicles or the new modes of consumption are going to impact the environment. There's other places where we might not recognize that, hey, this is an important part of our business. As we're doing shifts around power generation to more renewables, you know, how do we deal with employment? How do we make sure we have the right people in the gas-fired plants when there's no sun and the wind's not blowing? Well, we need to use big data and these tools to be able to do that. We have NR Canada that's doing some great work around, you know, how they look at electric vehicle charging and the grid that's there. Think about even on such germane things as safety. You know, can you put Internet of Things on those tanker cars that are pulling oil across the country, and then have that predictive maintenance that's going to go through? All of this IT and digitization makes us think about cybersecurity as well. I think it's important that we have this conversation around cybersecurity and how blockchain can really assist us in some of those types of transactions, but also recognize that there are experts in the country that are looking at this. You know, Innovation, Science, Economic Development recently created the Canadian Forum for Digital Infrastructure Resilience. I co-chair that group along with Assistant Deputy Minister. And what we're doing is we're looking at things like IoT assurance, internet resilience, so to be able to make sure that what those things that Canadians rely upon to keep warm in the winter, to make sure that they have their showers, are there and available, and that digital tech is available. We also have the CIO Strategy Council, which is Canada's newest standards body, which is also developing IoT standards for the energy grid. That's all really, really super exciting because we see these new business models emerging. We see new partnerships coming out, and we see great innovation happening in this area and having people build new skills that they can then export to the rest of the world. And with that, pass it back to you, Marnie.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. I can tell just by what you've discussed already, we're going to have an excellent conversation today. For everybody's information, the flow for today's webinar, we won't have presentations. It's more going to be a fireside chat. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, and then I'm hoping the audience will jump in and start asking some questions, and we'll move to your questions. So to kick things off, this will be a question for everyone, so please feel free to jump in. And I'll leave it to you guys for who wants to go first. But for the first question, let's talk about the scope blockchain technologies can play in creating smoother exchanges of energy between national grids and growing decentralized or off-grid energy assets. So maybe I'll pass it to Darren, since you're with Enbridge, to go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, gas is a little old school in that it's not as, sometimes sectors interesting as power and the complexity that's out there from a network perspective. But let's take things like renewables in the gas sector, renewable natural gas, where things like blockchain are exciting in that custody, of something like that could move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and we're no longer constrained by, well, how does a pipeline flow and how do we get from source to end user. If I'm an end user that wants renewable natural gas and I want to go across North America looking for that, presumably blockchain offers a better ability to trace that custody and move again move it, but easier to connect supply with demand. I think one key thing on a very, very, very basic level.
Great. Doug, do you have any additional insights?
Yes, thank you. So we have done some work on blockchain. I agree with the statements that John made and Darren just now, that it can really be a valuable tool for tracking energy transactions, particularly where there's an opportunity or a need to distinguish certain attributes, whether it be carbon intensity or other ones. So for sure, it could increase the transparency of those energy transactions. I think my power just went out. But the energy systems, that whether it's gas or electricity, they're both sort of fungible, meaning that the energy system's interconnected and combined, and that the product that goes into them is physically indistinguishable. So when that happens, there's a separation between the physical and the commercial aspects. And so buying and selling electrons and molecules, they're rarely bought and used by the same person. So I guess that's sort of maybe a bit of a case for blockchain, and that where that occurs and where there's that sort of need to distinguish, that it's a tool that can really help. But I think just in balance, I think blockchain hasn't necessarily taken off yet in this space, and I'm interested in what my panel colleagues would have to say about this. But I think there's a few reasons. One of them is that the marketplace is not that complex at this time in certain jurisdictions. So using BC as an example, energy is really largely bought by a small number of utilities and then sold to end use customers. And so I think that simplifying effect on transactions in the marketplace lessens the need for things like blockchain. And so it's maybe eroded a little bit of that business case, at least today. So yeah, I guess taking a little bit of a devil's advocate standpoint on blockchain, it hasn't really the need hasn't really necessarily emerged in some places. But having said that, I would say that as environmental attributes become more important, that we could see that really kind of take off.
So John, do you want to answer the first question and maybe also touch, if you can, on what Doug has said with regards to blockchain not taking off yet?
Sure. So I think the blockchain is a tool, a technology tool, and what it allows you to do is have an attestation that you can rely upon amongst a distributed audience. Like that, we often talk about blockchain as a tool in its own right, but let's think about the business models that are happening behind the scenes. And I think when you start to look at that consumer model for, as Doug mentioned, around how our energy is distributed and where we buy our energy from, we're not quite at a place where it's fully a decentralized model. And we've seen different jurisdictions move with different paces around this idea of bringing back in, let's say, the power grid. So if I have solar panels on my roof, or I have on my farmland, how do I put that energy back into the grid, and how am I recognized for that? So we've seen some of those business models evolve. And so blockchain could support some of those conversations. And also this idea of smart contracts and being able to have smart contracts to do just-in-time demand or just-in-time billing. I think where we start to see these things come together is in some of the back-end stuff, and it's not exciting when you think about vehicle maintenance or the maintenance of a pump or a pipe or something like that. I recall seeing a recent case study around shipping. and insurance for shipping using blockchain. And it turns out that you have a predefined route. If you're shipping, let's say, crude oil or natural gas across the ocean, and if you deviate from that route into risky areas, then your insurance can go up. And they use blockchain to be able to send and share that that route information in real time so that they can then renegotiate their insurance contracts. Now, is that something that I think is whiz bang and exciting from a technology perspective? Well, yeah, because I'm a technology person, but everybody doesn't feel the same way about tankers, right? And so I think that's where we can start to look at some of these innovative uses around the distributed communities. I think, we've seen the hype cycle of technologies, and for a while there, people were using blockchain for everything. And in places where it didn't really fit, they were using blockchain as just a general purpose database. And it's not really well suited for that type of work. And so we're now starting to see people and organizations really focus on what is the business transformation that I can drive using this piece of technology. And so it's the business transformation or that digital transformation that is driving the technology adoption and not vice versa.
So I'm going to deviate from my questions a little bit that I had given everyone ahead of time. So sorry about this, but you talked about, it's not really, you just mentioned it's not really the business side of it is driving it. So if we talk about that, or if we expanded on that, and Doug, you mentioned that blockchain hasn't really come into its own yet. Is there anything government can do, whether it's federal or provincial, that can help move this along?
Yeah, I think I would agree with John around the barrier is really the business case. So otherwise blockchain is a solution in search of a problem. And so, it really needs to be driven by, how can this tool address the business need? And so we pointing to that example of environmental attributes, as it becomes, emissions abatement, is already a big concern. As it increases and businesses and perhaps even customers get engaged in, managing their emissions, that information is going to be key. And I think that, a solution like blockchain, which can help provide transparency, to those attributes from their generation to their end use, can really help. So, I guess it's a long way of saying that, there's got to be a business case there that tool is the right tool to solve. And I think that's kind of what I took out of what John was saying.
If I could jump in, one of the things we see governments doing is around digital credentialing for individuals. Again, when you think about the digitization of energy, you think, well, what does credentials have to do with that? Well, we have a lot of people that drive across the country in vehicles and port these can be dangerous substances from place to place. And by giving digital credentials using blockchain, you then are able to recognize some of the additional certifications that those drivers would require. So if you're driving hazardous materials, how do you prove that you have the permissions to transport that and have the right credentials? Well, you can do that through the digital credentials. And we see that happening. Transport Canada is working on digital credentials. CBSA is working on digital credentials. Ontario, Saskatchewan, BC, Quebec all have digital credential projects underway, which then helps, prime the pump, so to speak, for familiarity with some of these tools. And then that can go out and create that broader ecosystem, if I could use that term, of producers in Canada that look at these innovative approaches.
Yeah, one last short comment, Marnie, is that I think Doug nailed it earlier with just the lack of complexity in kind of the market of say procuring and delivering energy. This is one where the market's actually gone backwards. I'm old and I remember when, we had a level of deregulation in a few provinces where the market was a little more complex and we had customers on different forms of contracts and different diverse suppliers out there. And we've kind of gone backwards. And I think we'll all move forward and it'll get more complex again. And the question is, what will that new form of complexity look like? And how do we get more diversity on both ends? So I think Doug's right that it's the lack of complexity that means it's still a solution looking for a problem. But I think we will get there where we'll have a role.
Well, I'm in Alberta, so I'm in one of those more complex, somewhat complex markets. So, does that mean you'd see a role somewhat for blockchain in Alberta sooner than in other provinces?
Yeah, I do think it's about complexity and what choice even do consumers have? I mean, consumers, I think in a lot of provinces, consumers have choice technically, but how many, what percentage of them are actually going out and buying supply from an alternative provider? It's just not that prevalent in the current sort of market structure.
Agreed.
One other piece, sorry, I just catching your breath there. One other thing that I think we need to consider in the continuum of energy is in this idea of the carbon marketplace. And we're seeing a great deal of interest in the carbon capture, carbon sequestering communities, and being able to have tangible results or tangible understanding of how much carbon is actually sequestered in some of the green spaces, either in the farming environment or even in the environments that are left to pasture. And looking at Internet of Things, big data, and being able to capture then those metrics from what is being actually sequestered within the land can then help in that part of the equation. And so again, it's that end-to-end business model that we need to look at, and that distributed community. We have a lot of producers in Canada, like farmers, agriculture, or landowners that are looking to see, how can they use that fallow land to be able to contribute to that economy.
That's actually a perfect roll into our next question, because we're going to talk about combating climate change in a way, and how energy efficiency will be one of the most efficient tools in combating climate change. And so what is the role that big data can play in creating highly customizable or predictable home energy use packages for consumers? And then a follow-up to that is, if we're playing with consumers' energy bills and changing things, will your energy bill become a cookie? Who wants to take first stab?
Maybe I can jump in on that first. So I completely agree. Energy efficiency and conservation is one of the first levers that we all look to pull on to help our customers avoid emissions and save money at the same time. And just to give a sense, like in BC, our provincial GHG emissions are about 63 million tons, and buildings sector is about 10% of that. And so it's a really important, activity that many utilities are undertaking. And so, and where does the role of big data come in? Well, really to help customers lower their bills and avoid emissions. We have a wide range of different conservation and energy management tools and programs to help customers do that. And, that requires data. To support business cases, to investigate opportunities, to make informed choices, to design programs, and really evaluate those investments after they go in and see how things worked out. And, so that's where data comes in, all kinds of it, whether it's consumption data, weather data, customer preference, appliance data, you name it. And, just to give you a sense, like we spent, Fortis BC spent about $85 million in the province last year, to help customers use less energy through energy efficiency conservation. And, a lot of that is supported by that information and that data and those analytics that help us, really put the, the greatest energy efficiency impact forward with the lowest cost, which is really important. I think the other piece where data is playing a big role, or at least, you can see utilities like us who are advancing, smart metering technologies, or otherwise known as advanced metering infrastructure, to help collect better and more granular data. And this is really helpful as well for, not only including in those energy efficiency and conservation programs to help know a lot more and get a lot more granular data about energy use, but also has a lot of other benefits in terms of safety, resiliency, and lowering customer rates. So I'd say that, data has a really big role, and there's lots of ways with which we're using it today and getting better and more sophisticated in the ways that we're doing it.
I have oh, sorry, go ahead, Darren.
Oh, I was just going to suggest John go next rather than the two utilities talk about the same types of energy efficiency programs that we both do.
You know, again, I go across the broad continuum of tool sets, and we see a lot of industrial, commercial organizations really retrofitting their environments with Internet of Things tool sets. So heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or just consumption tools, so that they have a better sense of what's happening. And you can imagine if you go across your industrial base or your commercial consumers, you know what that means to the producers. If you have a decision to make about whether or not you can do time of day savings, or you need to build a $1 billion power plant, you know, if you could have the whole grid or the whole consumer environment be much more thoughtful about their consumption and seeing where they're consuming elements, that then helps go a long way, and it creates this partnership between communities. You know, at Microsoft, we created 88 acres, which is instrumenting all our buildings in the environment. And believe it or not, there was one instrumented parking garage where we had a vent that we noticed that it was left open. And so we were heating this building, this parking lot, with the vent left open. When we managed to fix that vent, we saved $30,000 a year on energy costs. And so that's how big these savings can be. And so getting that together on a global scale or on the national scale is important. So we're starting to see connected communities start to bring those things together. Smart infrastructure, and we have some of the leading companies in the world doing smart infrastructure. When I think about PCL construction out there in Alberta, you know, what they're doing for job site insights and instrumenting buildings so that they hand them over to the consumer with a fully digital dashboard, it's really quite amazing. And so bringing that insight together with big data really helps then have that macro level view. I'll close on the last project. We have an AI for Earth program where we fund innovative projects. And we're working with Evergreen in the city of Calgary to look at the heating effect of cities. And where the heating effects are greater. So being able to take that big data and understand how our cities react into weather conditions, which helps us then predict energy efficiency, consumption, and other important metrics.
So I have a follow-up question. Doug, you mentioned your advanced meter technologies, and John, you talked about customers becoming more thoughtful on their consumption. Do you think we're going to move to the point where it doesn't even necessarily have to be the customer becoming more thoughtful, where the utility will actually look at a customer and say, you know, based on your history, at this time of day, you normally don't consume a lot of power, so we are going to automatically shut you down to use or switch over your power, so you're now charging this instead of your home. Can you see that happening in the future? And just, I guess, what are some of the implications with utilities taking control?
I don't know if you want me to jump in on that kind of question first. Maybe a bit more relevant to the electric utility than to the gas. Of course, there's different implications in shutting off the flow of gas in a gas system than say the electricity. But I would say what you're describing is sort of demand response, and demand response is a really valuable tool to help manage daily peaks and sometimes seasonal peaks. More so on the daily curves though, and that's a challenge for all utilities in that there's fairly pronounced daily peaks, and it takes a lot of capacity and resources to manage those peaks. And so anything that we can do to shift demand to times of the day where and level out those the daily duck curve, as they call it, will save customers money in the end and allow us to avoid adding, whether it's generation or transmission or distribution capacity in order to enable that. So I think whether it's a utility or there are other players in the market that are looking to sort of aggregate that demand response and monetize that and sell it back to the utility, if you will. Maybe not in our market, but in markets across the US. I think that's a valuable tool, and customers would need to make a choice about whether they value the benefits of and the cost savings that might come along with allowing control of their energy use to one of those companies, and the benefit it might provide in lowering rates overall.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the level of complexity we'll see the next, the next 10 years when it comes to serving customers, right? I think we can all be accused of not having big data as part of the energy landscape, say as much as telco or banking where it's more extensively used. And I think a lot of that is just, again, back to complexity. We if I think about, John gave some great examples of B2B technologies, building control automations, right? But those were low hanging fruit. They didn't, probably you could find those opportunities without a lot of big data analysis, right? And so now presumably we will enter the next level of how do we continue to drive efficiency. And one thing I don't think we've talked about today is price. Carbon pricing, and price will, as prices go up, we will finally start to see more complex decision making required. Whether it's a homeowner, a business owner. If I think about homeowners, there hasn't been a lot of complex decisions for people to make, for the last 20 years. You replace a furnace when it needs replacement. Water heater, your most complex decision is whether it's a tank or tankless. So I think the lack of complexity in the decision making has driven some of that complexity. But I think about the way, Enbridge, we have a lot of great data about how people use energy and its relationship to weather, but we don't understand the nature of that home, the age of the home, the size of the home. And I think that's the next level we need to get into to really get back to that education. Like what should the benchmark be for a 2,000 square foot home built in 1980, and really help keep people understand, okay, you're here, but we could get you to here with with these different measures, and more of those measures will start to be economic, as we start to see price go up.
Yeah, and I think just to that comment, Darren, I would mention that we have begun things like home energy benchmarking. So providing in customers periodically through the year a view of customer energy consumption in relation to peer housing. And while if you're just gas or just electric, or in some cases if you're both, you get maybe a more complete picture. Those insights help. And I would say that with say advanced metering technologies, you get even more granular data where you can help customers see that the profile. And I think in BC with smart meters largely deployed on the electric system, we're seeing those benefits here. But there's other benefits. It's not just customers. It's also on the utility systems themselves. For many years, we've used maybe some fairly sophisticated predictive modeling to try to determine when infrastructure needs to be upgraded. With things like better data, more granular data through enabled by AMI for our automated metering, we can start to really hone in on when infrastructure needs to be upgraded. And delaying or avoiding those in some cases will save customers quite a bit of money. So, it's sort of both sides of the fence. It's customer on the end use, but it's also the utility. The data can really help drive better decision making and minimize costs.
Well, I think on the minimized cost thing, I'm always intrigued by the new technologies, of course, the technology person, and the changes that we see in the households. And so, this idea of solar roof tiles is quite intriguing, and we can have a long debate over the cost effectiveness and the time to market for those things. But then when we look at what they plug into, which is that increasingly or decreasingly expensive battery that's in the basement of homes now instead of generators, we can imagine then having a more dynamic approach to really leveling out some of those peaks and flows that are there from a day-to-day basis. And so instead of drawing from the grid, you might say, hey, I'm going to draw from the battery at this point, and then in the evenings, I'm going to, on an off-peak time, then manage that. We need the big data to be able to support that and to be able to understand, when you're going to be charging that battery, when you're going to be drawing from it, and then how to manage that. I think there's an interesting conversation around the human element, the people part of it. How do I feel about the energy companies saying that I should not have my house at 75 degrees in the winter or at 72 in the summer, and then changing that. And there have also been studies, and this goes back a little bit, about changing the temperature but keeping the number on the dial so that you believe that it's that temperature, but it's not actually that temperature, so that you feel comfortable that your house is that way, but hey, it's actually a little bit warmer. And so that type of agreement that you have with your energy provider perhaps changes that conversation that you have when you look at your bill.
Fair enough. And I think I could spend a lot of time on this conversation, but we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So I am going to start with the first one. We'll move on to a couple of those questions, and then we can always come back to this. So first question, in terms of energy, Canadian oil and gas has had a rough few years, has a revenue issue, and is battling environmental opposition. Other forms of energy, wind or solar, are still scaling up. Blockchain seems like a mature stage solution, and there's no good fit for it. Basically, it is a solution for tomorrow's problems. So would any of you like to comment on that?
I would say just one point of clarity that I would sort of add is I agree that I don't think blockchain is a solution that can help us with things like recognizing the difference, that there is a difference between energy and capacity, and that things like wind and solar, on their own and with blockchain can't really provide capacity that's needed when customers need energy, such as, when it's cold out in the winter. And so, it can help, it can help with transactions, but I think at the end of the day, when you peel back the onion, society relies on energy when they need it. And that's provided through capacity, and things like wind and solar, we will find ways to create demand response and use energy when it's available and when it's being produced. But at the end of the day, we still need to kind of focus on making sure that we add capacity, and I agree, things like blockchain aren't necessarily going to help us do that. That comes down to physical infrastructure.
Anyone else like to comment on?
Again, I see blockchain fitting in the back end. And so things like predictive maintenance, vehicle records, where you have a distributed environment. And so when you think about it, you may have a rental water heater in your house, and you might have your service records done in a blockchain, so that everybody can have that consistent source of truth to understand when it's been serviced, what type of warranty you have on it, when it can be replaced, who's touched it last time, all those types of things. So it's those types of back-end solutions that I see blockchain starting first, because the marketplace is in a particular fashion here in Canada.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, John used that word, marketplace exchange. It helps with exchange. Until that whole, meeting supply with demand equation evolves, and I'm repeating myself, but until that changes and evolves, I think that's what has to happen for it to have that real role.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a couple more questions that have come in, so I'll continue with the audience questions. And I also just want to remind the audience, if you do have a question, you can go to www.slido.com and enter your questions there. And the meeting number is 375741. Okay, so the next question is, blockchain seems to be only valuable to big companies. How is blockchain relevant for the small and medium-sized enterprises?
Well, again, I think it's the business outcome that we look at, and the blockchain might be hidden from that transaction, right? And so one of the great examples that we have around a blockchain pilot we were doing was a vehicle maintenance record. And so you carry this vehicle maintenance record with the vehicle, and then when something, let's say untoward happens and you go into a garage, the garage owner, as part of that system, the technician can call up the full record of the vehicle and have assurance that all the oil changes were correctly entered and by the right authorized person. So you have that source of truth for the maintenance records on there. You don't see blockchain as part of that solution. It doesn't come up and poke you in the eye to say, this is blockchain. It says, this is the distributed vehicle maintenance record. And so that's where I think the small to medium enterprise will start to see some of these tools. In Alberta, there's a startup company, Credivera, and they're doing credentials for transportation drivers. And so they have then that credential that says, hey, I'm a type D license, and I don't know all the types for the licenses, so I apologize. But hey, I'm allowed to transport hazardous goods. And so if you're pulled over at the safety station, then they can have that assurance that, hey, your wallet contains the right credential to be able to do that. You don't see blockchain as the part of that. You see the digital wallet as part of that. And so these tools really disappear in the background, and it's more the business function that comes up in the front.
So is it though, is it a part of a cost function with regards to big companies, or is it cost effective to have these technologies for the small, medium-sized companies as well?
I think you can use it to form a better product or service. Like just building on John's little idea there. Enbridge once upon a time used to be in the equipment business. We used to lease and rent equipment. And we do envision ourselves getting back there as new tech. Let's take something like a hybrid heat pump as an example, where in temperate weather, your electric heat pump runs, but only on the coldest days does the gas furnace run. And we envision potentially forming a bundle that would homeowners would use as a more carbon friendly solution to heat a home. Blockchain could be part of that. That custody, that maintenance, those records. It just could be part of the back end of delivering a better product and service for end users. But again, all back to how do I heat my home? How do I keep my home comfort? All those types of things. It just makes for a better service.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the next question. So with carbon pricing increasing, energy consumption will decrease, presuming customers act on that. I question how useful all this new data and insight will be in terms of informing action. People will already be taking steps towards energy efficiency.
Maybe I'll go first and say, I think people always need help. I think, if I can say something mildly controversial, like energy is a low interest category. People don't spend a lot of time thinking about energy. And so, I do think there's a role to be played to help people, just help educate and make informed decisions. Really make it clear how much could you save by adopting technology A, B, or C. And I think, I think we all get enamored with the idea sometimes that people are, whether it's a homeowner or a business owner, they'll be really engaged and do these things. And if anything that I've learned over a long time in energy, it's that it is sometimes hard to get people to think about this. It won't be easy.
I agree. And I mean, it really depends on the province that you're in as well. I mean, if you're not paying high costs, it's definitely not on the top of your mind, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be energy efficient.
I think that knowledge really helps people then make better decisions. The Energy Star system has been so popular because you get that knowledge and you get that insight around, hey, this is an energy guzzling appliance. This one is a little bit better, and per price, people will make that decision. I can imagine in my household, when I look at my energy bill, if I can have something to say, John, the weather stripping on your door will save you $10 or $20 a month, then, hey, I'll focus on the energy stripping on the door. The other piece that I think is really intriguing around the people side is gamification. And how do you create gamification to get that little gentle nudge? And we've seen that in some vehicles. So if you happen to drive in a hybrid vehicle or an EV, they'll have little prompts. So I was in a Ford EV and it had these little leaves growing, and you're trying to grow the whole tree so that you can really show your energy efficiency. At the end of, I rented a different car, it said, my best score for my fuel consumption. And so it was really trying to get me to really change my behaviors around that. And so imagine doing that on a street level basis to say, hey, you know what? You're the bright light on your street with no snow in your yard because you're using all this energy. All your neighbors are better than you. Oh, gee, I want to get in there and beat them.
Being a competitive person, that would work for me. Sorry, go ahead, Doug.
I'm not sure we've tapped into the full benefits of gamification yet, but I'll take that one away. But I was just going to say on Darren's comment that, energy can be a fairly low engagement product at times, but it's also the demand for energy is fairly inelastic. I think that, people need energy. And so as things like carbon taxes increase the cost of energy for for our customers, they will be looking to to us to help them, and that's supported, as I mentioned earlier, by the data of what's going to give you the biggest energy savings for the cost. And that's the lens that we need to look through this at, especially as more energy choices come in front of customers, that they're going to be looking for that, looking for us to help them through those decisions, and help them ultimately save money, because affordability is a real concern around energy.
Yeah, one thing we constantly debate, and I don't pretend to know the right or wrong answer to this, is and I hinted at it earlier about Doug mentioned AMI and smart metering, and I guess I kind of hold the view that there isn't a lot of behavior in energy use. There's some, but a lot of people set a thermostat and they don't change it a lot. A programmable thermostat can let it ride up and down during the day as needed, but there's still not a lot of behavior there. And that's where I get to thinking the more interesting thing is, how efficient is that home? How efficient is that building? I think that's where there's more opportunity and where we should push the real-time elements of AMI. Sometimes I question. It's not to say that there's not value there, but if the idea is get people more engaged, I personally think it's education. Just it's like the fuel. It's like a car. Like people get familiar with the fuel economy ratings of cars, and I think if we did the same for homes, and we did that as part of buying and selling homes, or properties that are B2B properties that are leased, I think we would move the needle here a lot more.
And as John mentioned, sometimes all you need is weather stripping.
That's right. I mean, Darren's right. The single biggest impact on energy use typically is weather and not customer behavior. So focusing on the envelope in the building is, and the equipment is a smart place to start.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move on to the next question. So we're getting quite a few coming in now, and so with only 15 minutes left to go, hopefully we can get to all these. So next question is, how can federal regulatory framework support digitization of energy or use of big data? Bracket, keep in mind jurisdictional issues and matrix of overlapping provincial, federal, municipal regulations. And/or what do you see as the biggest regulatory irritants in the space right now?
Well, we're doing. The easiest one is we're doing a big one with price, right? Price, just price alone is a key signal that will make things change. So there's one, regulatory instrument that's automatically gonna force things to evolve here. I know that's stating the obvious, but it's always good to get that one out of the way.
I mean, I can't think of kind of a federal regulatory framework impediment to the use of data. We use, we're using data, as I mentioned, in all kinds of applications, and really trying to make that available to customers through things like, home energy use reporting, for example. So, for me, I don't necessarily see that it's federal barriers in the way there that could be helped, but a lot of what sort of the predominant influence in the way that things kind of are done are due to customers, right? Customers are the reasons that we do things, and it's their sort of needs and that we're satisfying here. So, I think as customers get, things like price signals put added pressure on energy bills, customers get more engaged in their energy use. That's what's going to drive perhaps the greater use of data from where it is today. But I wouldn't say that, that there's a federal barrier in the way that I'm aware of anyways.
So if there's no real federal barriers or even provincial, is that in itself a problem? And so let's move towards cybersecurity. We did have a question come up about cybersecurity, and so let's talk about that. So if there are no real barriers, is that a barrier, or is that an issue in itself? And let's talk about cybersecurity and the kind of the downside of blockchain with regards to cybersecurity.
You want to go first, John?
Yeah. Well, so blockchain is a way to enhance cybersecurity, and so I wouldn't. I don't think there's necessarily a downside from a cybersecurity perspective, but again, we have to be careful that we don't see blockchain as a hammer, because then everything will be nails. And so blockchain has its place to help secure that environment. As we start to transition more and more from the operational technologies that were disconnected to the information technologies that are more connected, we do need to be mindful of the security controls and the security requirements that were there. In the past, there was an air gap, so to speak, to be able to operate these systems. That air gap is slowly but surely disappearing. And we know that these assets that we have, these critical infrastructures that we have, are targets for other sophisticated actors. And we saw that with the pipeline exploit over the last few weeks that has happened. We know that the Ukrainian power grid was subject to cyber attack and exploitation. So we do need to be concerned about that. There are straightforward ways to be able to secure things, and we need to make sure that people are aware of those tools and techniques to secure things. We need to be able, on a national basis, to be able to help provide that protection on the critical infrastructure and help put in place policies, almost like a digital Geneva Convention that our president the president of Microsoft has talked about, Brad Smith, to prevent these cyber attacks, so that we can continue to have safe and efficient use of the web by civilians, quotes unquote, because this has now become a new domain of hostilities. And so we do need to guard against that, and we do need to be aware. But we also need to be assured that, look, the degree of alarm is not necessarily at a five alarm fire. Our providers in Canada have very sophisticated chief information security officers, very sophisticated cybersecurity programs, and are keeping ahead of that in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity to help raise the bar. But we do need to be vigilant.
Yeah, I would say as a utility, we know very well how important energy is to society, and those recent events, whether it was the Colonial Pipeline or the brownouts in California or the Texas polar vortex, those will really demonstrate how each of those incidents may be caused by different things, but demonstrate how important energy is to society today. And they're costly, disruptive, and in some cases deadly. And so I think as in the energy industry, as we have to keep cybersecurity as a top priority. We take safety as a top priority. And as it relates to cybersecurity, there's we need to have really really good protocols to review vulnerabilities, to manage the threat landscape. And, John talked a little bit about some of those things, but I think I would underscore how important that is, just as a practical aspect of safety and welfare of society.
Great. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to keep things moving with the questions here. So next one is, do you think COVID will slow the progress of blockchain development and adoption?
So hopefully the source of the question won't be disappointed that I'm not going to answer it in the context of blockchain specifically, but I think what we've seen with COVID is just more digital adoption. We had the biggest drop. We've been striving to reduce, live calls and push people to more self-service, and we've been successful at that. But 2020 was our most successful year ever. Just people's willingness to embrace and use those channels. I know the question was in the context of blockchain, but the most insightful thing I have to say is just that it's really helped accelerate the use of those channels for our customers. We introduced a chatbot a couple of years ago. My account's now probably our primary channel for serving customers versus a live phone call, and kind of a boring element, but it speaks to the theme of just digitization. Again, more and more and more of it in boring old energy.
Great. Anyone else want to add on to what Darren said? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. What other areas do you see the blockchain-based service records? I can see some use cases in pretty much every service-based work that touches high-value equipment. Do you agree? Do you think some work needs to be done at the policy level before this can be implemented? So blockchain-based service records.
So service records was one example. Really it's about traceability and traceability with confidence. And so it could be service records for a vehicle or that train car. It could be traceability of agricultural products. And so think about the organics, organic foods environment, or the livestock environment. Aquaculture has using blockchain for shellfish and another seafood, so that you have that certainty of location of harvest, time of harvest, water temperatures, and you're able to pass that manifest along. It's not necessarily just a policy type conversation. It's really that ecosystem conversation of the whole supply chain. And so, if you're a producer, if you're a harvester of aquaculture, your incentive to use blockchain is not really going to be that much if your distributor is not going to use that. It has a paper-based system. But if you have that whole supply chain from the harvester through distributor through to the consumer or the retail agent, and you can get a price premium for that, well, then that changes the conversation. And so what you need to do is you need to build up everybody to say, here's the value proposition in having that certainty. It makes no sense to have all these assurances of quality of goods and only find at the end they're just dumping them onto a dock someplace and shoveling them into a cart. That doesn't fit with the business model. And so it's really looking across those communities. And so there's a whole bunch of initiatives underway that are trying to start off with creating this community. So think of a public ledger, and then hopeful that it'll grow out from there.
Thank you. We have only 4 minutes left, and there are a couple more questions. So I'm going to pose this as the last question. If we could have kind of a quick reply, whether it's from everyone or just one, and then we'll do a little bit of a closing comments from everybody. So the last question here is, should Canada just wait and be a late adopter of blockchain? We have a smaller market and population, not to mention our vast geographic spread and the fact that energy markets are somewhat unique to various regions.
Maybe I can start. I would say that I don't think we should be a late adopter in Canada. We have a reputation for being innovative across our country. We also sell a lot of products, including energy, to the rest of the world, and that some of the way in which we market our energy and it is inherent in the products is that it may be the lowest carbon emitting forms of say natural gas, for example. It may benefit us to adopt blockchain as a way of providing traceability to that resource and increasing the value. I think that's what Darren said earlier in this is, blockchain is perhaps a way of increasing the value of your product. And so we have to take it from that perspective. And I think it would, we shouldn't take a strategy to be a late adopter on these technologies, but allow them to, fit where they may.
Great, Darren or John?
Again, it's just a matter of how things evolve. I hate to say it, but there just hasn't been that evolution. I think evolution's going to come, and then I think it'll be incumbent on all of us to embrace, well, what does that change look like so that we're not that late adopter, right? I just see, energy transition is coming. I think we're just stuck in this, what exact form is it going to take here over the next few years? And then, the goal will be figure it out fast.
We can't afford to be late adopters. We need to drive on with Canadian innovation. I always like to mash together Richard Florida and Freeman. We have innovation clusters in Canada. We do great innovation across the country, and we can project that know-how around the world. And so let's look at those spots, pick our spots to innovate using blockchain in the energy sector, and let's project that around the world, because I think people look to Canada as our pristine land and our green consciousness, and that's a brand that we can market around the world. And so using blockchain to energy would just fit nicely into that.
Perfect. I kind of think that's a great way to end talking about Canada in general, but we do have kind of a minute left to go. So I want to give everybody an opportunity to give their kind of closing statement. So we'll go Darren, Doug, and John again. And so if you have 20 seconds to give your final input, what are you going to say?
Energy transitions here. I repeat myself earlier. The next 10 years will probably see more change than the last 25, and I'm very excited about that.
I think I would agree. I would say that the energy transition is here as well, and things like data and technology and doing things different than we did before will be will be our future. And again, data is going to help us make a lot of those decisions.
It's an exciting time for the energy sector and for us as consumers. And so the use of these tools to have better insight into our consumption and our savings, energy savings, is going to be truly exciting.
Great. I agree with all you. I think it's going to be an exciting time, and we are definitely in an energy transition. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this webinar, and especially the Canadian Chamber of Commerce for having all of us, and all of you, John, Doug, and Darren. Thank you for your great insights and answering all our questions today. We really appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Stay safe.
Thanks,
Take care.